Hey, kids, welcome to Just a Game. I'm your podcast friend, Rob Kerr. Thanks for joining us. We're doing this show live, Treaty 7 territory. It's an inclusive program, so anybody and everybody is welcome. If you want to just hang out and vibe with us today, I guess that's the new word, do that. Loving this program, loving this program. Two great guests scheduled for you. Danny Austin for Post Media. A lot of you know him from his outstanding work covering the CFL and the Calgary Stampeders, but he's also been covering the Calgary Flames. And, well, he's a man of all seasons. So he's going to join us actually in studio, the new look, Oodle Noodle Studio. Welcome to the Oodle Noodle Studio. You see it behind us here? Oodle Noodle. And Just a Game, that's us. It's fantastic. Also, this is a treat. I think you're going to enjoy this one. I am for sure. And that's part of the battle sometimes, I guess, is we got to make sure we're doing the stuff we love. Brody Dupont. Does that name ring a bell? Brody Dupont, former 4-year member of the Calgary Hitmen, drafted by the New York Rangers back in, I think, 2006. Went on to a rather lengthy career in the American Hockey League and then over in Europe, and is now coaching the Cardiff Devils of the Elite Ice Hockey League in Britain, in England, and in the UK, with some incredible Calgary ties. So we'll likely get into that with Brody and catch up on what, because they're right in the middle of a playoff hunt. Doubt very much that they're caught up in all of this trade deadline shenanigans, but there is trade deadline shenanigans to get going. All right. Let's start off with the last night or the last Flames game if you're listening to this at another time. Holy crap. This team, and I've been racking my brain all day. This team is Alexei Kovalev. This team is Alexei Kovalev, both with the Stanley Cup in their history. But if you remember Alexei Kovalev, at times, his teammates, the people around him, referred to him as the most talented player in the game, yet consistently underperformed, consistently underwhelmed, was good one year, wasn't so good. The Calgary Flames are the Alexei Kovalev of teams right now. That was as dominating a performance against a team that is likely going to set a record for wins this year in the National Hockey League in the regular season. That was as dominant a performance as you're going to see. I mean, right after them. Right from the drop of the puck, they got going, they got some good momentum, they got some pressure, and then guess what? The first shot went in against. 8th time this season, 2nd game in a row. This team was trailing in the first period 2-0 and out shooting Boston by a 15-4 margin. As the game wore on, you thought, okay, this is likely going to turn into Colorado, another goal for Boston, and it's going to get away on the local hockey heroes. That did not happen. Give credit to the local hockey heroes. They fought back. They fought all the way back in the 3rd period. Looked like they were about to stun the Bruins with 2 goals in just over a minute to take a 3-2 lead. A team that had yet to come back in the 3rd period to win a hockey game, the Flames, and a team that had yet to surrender a lead in the 3rd period this season, the Bruins. And it looked like it was on path for that. And then Nikita Zadorov took out everybody, just kind of went playing physical, trying hard. You know, it was not a lack of effort, but wiped out, I believe, Dylan Dubé. It opens up a lane. The Bruins, too talented to be given that opportunity. Orlov having the game of his life, already with 2 goals, makes a nice, sweet, soft pass to the side of the net. And I believe it's Jake DeBrusk, the Albertan, that taps it in. Go to overtime. Okay, overtime has not been great for the Flames, but this one starts off real good. Great opportunities. Keep going. 6-3, 6-2, they're out shooting the Bruins, but with 4 seconds left, I don't know. I don't have to tell anybody. 4-3, overtime loss. Couple thoughts on this one. Rasmus Andersson might have been the best player on the ice. Played the most of anybody on the ice. Was a force and a factor out there. In a year in which we're not allowed to talk about the good stuff because the bad stuff is hanging over this team like a dark cloud, Rasmus Andersson is coming into his own, continues to develop. He's going to be an all-star in this league, kids. He is. Is he going to battle for a Norris Trophy? maybe in the same way that if Mark Giordano continues to, or if he continues to build like Mark Giordano did, maybe a little later on in his development. But man, he was good. Walker Duehr didn't play a lot, but when he was out there, it was noticeable. Gives that fourth line a dimension. Passes the puck a lot better than I thought. Don't think he's destined. We'll see. It's still early in the career, but he might be more than just a fourth line player. He might bump you up into the third line there. And again, continue to be overly impressed with Jacob Pelletier. When the Flames went ahead 3-2 and it looked like Pelletier might have got that goal, great shot from the bench of him and Huberdeau celebrating. It's a loss. We're angry, all of those sort of things. So, Rob, why are you bringing up these positives? Because there's some things that we need to investigate. There's some things we really need to pay attention to. If this team was falling apart in the cracks, you wouldn't see that. They tried. They hustled. They went after the best team. But, Rob, let me argue with myself here, folks. Second game in as many nights for Boston. They were tired. BS. It's the 9th time they've played back-to-back. They'll play 14 times this year. Game 1, they're 7-0-2 on the season. Game 2, they improved to 7-2. This is a good hockey club. The Flames continue to be that enigma wrapped in a riddle. They look good. Okay, why did they lose? Goaltending? Absolutely. There's no sugarcoating this. 2 goals on 5 shots for Zadorov, including the first one going in. Markstrom was good. Markstrom was solid, but Markstrom didn't steal you this game. And Kiprasov, Markstrom last year, maybe even Vladar last year, would have made a save, would have made a play, maybe would have read the Orlov pass. I mean, wishes and dreams and all of those things won't buy you a cup of coffee, but the goaltending is just not good enough. And you know what? Yes, they were dangerous in overtime, but you got to win in overtime. And if you go all the way back to Daryl Sutter's first foray as coach of this club, they have never been good beyond extra time. They just haven't. They haven't been good in shootouts. Not saying it's his fault, but there is a little bit of history here. And again, 23rd 1-goal loss of the season. Let that sink in. I think they're the Alexei Kovalev of teams. I really do. I think they're talented. They're underperforming. They drive you nuts. They drive you batty. 2 more days to acquire Chychrun. I'm sure there's some guys in Columbus we've never heard of that we could get. Not a lot left. Continues to be busy. All right. 4 shows in, and we effed up. 4 shows in, and we effed up. What did I tell you guys? What was the manifesto all about? This show is about information, not affirmation. I don't want you coming here to me to tell you what to think. We ran a clip because I had a theory that after the the Nashville deal with Tampa Bay for Jeannot, in which they got, I think, 9 picks or 5 picks in a player, whatever it was. I got thinking, geez, maybe there's a shift coming in hockey. Maybe we're not valuing draft picks anymore. And then lo and behold, Frank Seravalli was with Jason Gregor on Monday on their show, and he had this great point. Frank had this clip, so I had our outstanding producer Printz grab it. Oh, this is so we gotta play this because this really supports my theory that draft picks aren't valuable anymore. And he was talking about that he was told by a GM over the weekend that after the 24th pick, you have a 2.4% chance of any pick beyond that, of the 211 from 10 years ago and whatever it is now, that would play 100 games in the NHL. And I go, there's gold. Frank Seravalli says it. I can play it. It supports my theory. And it did support my theory, except it's wrong. Except that it's wrong. And that's on me. Okay? That's on me. Person tweeted me and said, would you please walk me through your math on this? In fairness, it's Frank's math, but that's not the point. I'm taking responsibility for this. So I grabbed 3 random seasons. I grabbed 10 years ago, 9 years ago, and 11 years ago. Drafts ago, sorry. So in 2012, 48 players drafted beyond the 24th spot in the first round went on to play 100 more games. That's 25.6%. That's pretty high. Not as high as 2011, when 56 of those players, 187 players, ended up playing 100 more games. That's 29.9%. And then 9 drafts ago, 45 players out of 187 ended up playing 100 more. That's 24%. Now, I'm no math wizard, but I am accountable to you. So kudos to the person that called me on that. Will I correct every mistake? No, there's not enough time humanly for me to do that. But I do want to know, or want you to know, I am accountable to you. So thank you to that person. Oh, by the way, Gary was in town. This is tough for me to talk about, folks. This is tough. Gary Bettman. I guess I shouldn't use that first name. I could use that first name. It is the first time in 19 years that the commissioner of the National Hockey League has come to this city and not spent time with me. I don't feel personally offended. I feel disappointed for you because it would have been an opportunity for me to get to the bottom of some of the answers, some of the questions, of course. Famously, I challenged him to a fight on the air to prove a point. These are the types of things we'd like to deliver to you. I feel like I let you down. This is a tough start. Tell me, this program's going to get better, okay? I just want to be honest with you. Gary's apparently talked to the premier, the mayor, and city council about the building. Feels very optimistic. Cool. I thought this one was a little bit, that stuff, we'll see. Everybody's optimistic today, but when the rubber hits the road, we'll all buy in. Gary's getting a little pissed off with this. We're holding players out for trade-related reasons. And I note this because if you're a listener of the Bob McCowan podcast, about 10 days ago, they had Bill Daly on. And Bill was asked that same question. We're not surprised, not concerned. We're monitoring. Nothing to see here. Move along. And now you got the commissioner acknowledging that this thing has taken off. Well, guess what? When you give an inch, they take a mile. I love general managers. I do. They're some of the nicest people in the world. Wouldn't give any of them my wallet. They're in it to win it. You give them an inch, they're going to kick down the door. Guess what? You're going to see legislation in the NHL next year that will prohibit, I can see it coming, prohibit or restrict or somehow limit the ability of teams to hold players out. By the way, Anaheim tonight will hold out a couple of defensemen, including Klingberg. So, as we get closer and closer, more teams are doing it. I think the egregious one here is the Jacob Chychrun, who has not played now in 2023 or something like that. I think it's 2 weeks going. So we'll watch that with great interest. We may bring this up with our first guest. I'm going to bring him on a little early because he's here. Today's reading assignment, funny enough, he works for Post Media, and so does Derek Van Diest. The reading assignment, Canada's soccer problems go well beyond former president Dr. Nick Bontis. If you haven't been paying attention to this story, please do. It's really complicated. It's really complicated, to be perfectly honest. And the 2 or 3 steps forward this nation has taken in soccer may be undone by a couple of steps backwards. But Derek did an amazing job of also pointing out the hypocrisy and, quite honest, damn near criminality of FIFA. The government would like to bring the Canadian Soccer Business Group in front of Parliament to answer questions about the deal that's kind of at the center of everything, the women's national team payment, why Nick Bontis is on the way out. But Van Diest does a really good job of explaining that, who doesn't like that? FIFA doesn't like that. And do you know what steps FIFA might take? They might ban Canada, might, it's possible, legally they could ban Canada from participating in the Women's World Cup in Australia. They could do that because of what they would call government interference. So, there's government interference Russia style, and then there's apparently Canadian style, which is looking for transparency and for answers. So anyway, that's today's reading assignment. It'll be up on Twitter here in a little while. Let's do this. Let us bring in our first guest. And I keep saying this, but I've had an agenda since day one. There were certain people that I wanted on the program since I retired and unretired, and he is one of them. You can follow him at Danny Austin 9 on Twitter. He works for Post Media. He is a man of many colors and many coats. Danny Austin, kind enough to join us here in the Oodle Noodle studio. How are you?
I'm good, man. You guys have a nice setup here.
Not bad,
I gotta say. Yeah, I'm impressed. I'm excited to be here. I will say, listening to your intro, I sometimes forget that more than anyone in Calgary media, you pick fights. I feel like I've seen you in the last week and a half challenge someone to a wrestling match.
Yes.
I just found out that you've challenged Gary Bettman to a fight. I love that about you. I think we need that fighting spirit more here. So just wanted to offer my appreciation before we got going.
Well, a little context to the Gary Bettman story. 2000, by the way, if you're looking for that echo, it's gone now, Mark. So good job, buddy. 2004, after Todd Bertuzzi hit Dominic Moore, after Dominic hit Moore, after he hit Naslund, but prior to Bertuzzi hitting him, Gary Bettman came to town. And if you'll remember, in 2004, there was a controversy about the initial hit and the response to the initial hit. And my first opportunity to talk to Gary Bettman was between these places. And we were talking about the role of fighting, and I got rather animated. And I said, so I can challenge you to a fight, and Frank Brown, your handler, what's he supposed to do? He goes, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if I beat you up, does Frank then come and beat me up? And we had a lot of fun with it. But it made the point about the culture.
Of course.
Right? And here we are 19 years later, still having in many ways the similar conversation. So this is a long way of going. If I challenge you to a fight today, it's likely just to prove a point.
Good. And I'm a terrible fighter, I think. I haven't been in a fight really ever.
But you know what scares me of you? Your coverage of UFC. Surely to God, you had to pick something up along the way.
That's true. Through osmosis.
I
think I figured out how UFC fighters, how to possibly gain myself like an extra second before they knock me out. Because let's be honest, no, I gained absolutely nothing. But I did cover the UFC for a long time and covered some huge fights.
Do you miss it?
Yes and no. I don't miss the culture of the sport. I miss the events.
Yeah.
Showing up at a fight week, there is no better. I mean, if you're a traveling sports reporter, like for hockey, for example, I'll roll into Dallas the night before the game, be there for morning skate. The team's flying out after the game. I'm not. Yeah. I'm there at 6 a.m. at the airport. UFC, you show up on a Tuesday and you don't leave until the Sunday. So you really get to explore some cities. You get integrated into the culture for 5 or 6 days at a time, which was amazing. And I really, really, really loved. But there was a lot of stuff. I mean, in terms of fighter pay, just Dana White in general is not my type of guy.
Yeah.
And to be honest, some of the politics that are associated with the sport, I found really, really challenging. And it's why, I'm sure we'll get into it, but CFL just became a bigger and bigger part of my job. And then the hockey opportunities came up, and no, I don't regret leaving it at all. I miss my friends.
Sure.
I miss being there, but no, I was not a good fit anymore for the direction the UFC had taken.
So were you assigned it, or were you lucky enough to get it? Were you a fan before you covered it?
I would say that I was a George St. Pierre fan.
Okay.
Probably someone who popped in for Anderson Silva fights. The big ones I would watch more as a social thing, right? I mean, not a hardcore. And then the way that the Sun, back before we merged, back before we've had a lot of cuts, but I was a desker. So you got brought in, and you basically are laying out other people's work on the page, and that's where you started at the Sun. And about a year in, I was, desperate to do more writing, wanted to prove that I could do this reporting thing as well.
Yeah.
And our editor-in-chief, Jose Rodriguez, walked up to me and said, "Hey, man, you like fights, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I like fights." And he said, "Cool, we need a new national UFC writer. Want to do it?" And from there, it just kind of took off. And, we had a nice travel budget at the time. So I was probably 10 fight weeks a year.
Right.
There was a point where, a particular hotel in Vegas was basically my second home. And yeah, it became huge. And I mean, I just look back and, covering Conor McGregor fights, I think I covered 7 of his fights. I still haven't done an event that felt that big. Nothing NHL, nothing football, nothing. Right. It was huge. You knew that the world was watching. Just the clicks on your stories were so just motivating because you want to do a good job because you knew the world was paying attention to you. And yeah, it became, I fell in love with it, and then I fell out of love with it.
Yeah. No, and it makes sense. It's funny. I've seen it. I remember UFC 1 on a videotape on a junior bus in hockey. And I remember Royce Gracie and all the Gracies, and I remember the Gees, and I remember
Yep.
watching a guy for 40 minutes, put an arm bar on until he breaks a guy's shoulder and he wins.
Yep.
2, this kind of tipping point of like, is this going to become mainstream? Is this, or is this human cockfighting?
Mm-hmm.
And then, I remember young Pat Steinberg was big into it. And it's like, dude, you got to keep pushing. There's something to this. And then whatever the tipping point was, it became another pastime. It really surpassed boxing, did it not, in North America?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that with boxing, there's just so much money in boxing. So it's hard to necessarily know which one's bigger at this point. I think that UFC on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis just has more of a footprint,
right,
culturally in our sports landscape.
Yeah.
But I do think, a big boxing fight, a Tyson Fury fight, a Canelo Alvarez fight, those are still probably as big as anything outside of Conor McGregor. Like John Jones is fighting this week for the first time in 3 years.
Yeah.
Fighting Cyril Gane.
Yeah.
Do you know anyone who's talking about it? That's arguably the greatest fighter of all time, going up to heavyweight, and no one really seems to care.
Is he or was he? Because I think we're getting a little bit jaded on the is he, was he, right?
Yep.
In terms of another sport with a lot of money that makes it very difficult for you to step away. You mentioned George St. Pierre, right?
Mm-hmm.
George came back.
He did.
Right?
I was there.
And that would be my question is, are we now so jaded that, we're beginning to, because how many times did Chuck Liddell fight? Right? Like
way too many times, right? Way too many times.
And that was kind of the beginning of the sport to get it on the, but now I think we're so cultured that we kind of know the difference, don't we?
I think we do. I do think that when it comes to MMA, in my time, like George was special.
Mm-hmm.
I still think, and then you have Khabib Nurmagomedov, who did retire on top, never lost a fight.
Yep.
And then there's John Jones. And I think those are the 3 great ones. I've been fortunate enough to cover them all, fighting championship fights as well as getting attacked while in buses. I've covered it all with those guys. And so I think John, it's exciting, but truthfully, I'm not going to be watching the fight on Saturday.
You're not, eh?
No. I'm not spending the money.
What's the next fight you want to see?
When Conor comes back, I'm always going to be interested.
But that's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And there is that, the Flames play Saturday. That's part of why I won't be watching.
But I know what you mean.
Yeah. And probably I would, if it was on, I'd be interested to watch it in the bar, but there's not that same excitement that there was pre-pandemic. And I don't know how much of that is just that the sport is alienated.
Right.
Some people, I don't know if it's there's just a lack of energy in terms of the promotion because they struck a deal with ESPN that basically guarantees them a certain amount of money.
Yep.
But I certainly don't feel the excitement that I used to. And that's disappointment. That's disappointing because when I went, I said I wasn't a huge fight fan going in, but I came to really respect the athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And it became, I would talk to my parents who they're not fight people. They're very nice, quiet, academically inclined people.
Yeah.
And what we would talk about was how just interesting. It takes a certain type of person to want to step into a cage and put themselves in danger, right? And you're risking embarrassment. And I think sometimes we forget it because we just view that. So that's what was interesting to me was, okay, why did you, who didn't need the money's not good enough for you to really need, what was it about this sport that attracted you? And I never really got an answer because they were all different. There wasn't one motivating thing, but what it was not was, oh, I was a tough guy who was fighting on the street. It was never that. It was all a martial arts approach, and I loved that.
Right. Except for Kimbo Slice.
We
tried that.
We tried that.
We tried.
Yes.
What happened? Not what happened. As someone who does concern myself with, kind of equity and diversity, it's to me, Ronda Rousey at her height was such an important sports figure for women's sport. And it seemed like, okay, she, bright for a couple years, got beat, but there never was it Holm that beat her, Holly Holm?
It was Holly Holm, and then
but there never seemed to be the carry on. I'm not saying there aren't capable female fighters. That's not what I'm saying. But there has there been a female attraction like Rousey at the top of a card?
It's funny for me. Amanda Nunes is that is I don't know if she has the mainstream crossover appeal.
Is that what it was for Rousey, you think?
Yeah, Ronda Rousey, she was charismatic. She was unlike anything we'd ever seen. I think that it was so important for me as someone who, loves covering women's sport.
Mm-hmm.
It was just cool to see someone so unapologetically break through, and then leave everyone in the dust. And her femininity was part of what made her a superstar, which was awesome.
Right.
And I will actually give MMA credit for this. I mean, I've said this once before on air, and a caller immediately called in to remind me about show jumping, and I have covered Spruce Meadows, so I will. But other than those two, I mean, there is no other sport where you turn it on and men and women are competing on the same broadcast, right? I mean, obviously not against each other, but that's an amazing thing that doesn't happen in hockey, basketball, football.
Well, it's the only one in mainstream, I would say. No disrespect to the folks at Spruce Meadows, but mainstream that would be on ESPN, TSN. Exactly. Over the air network.
So that's an amazing thing, and I do think that the sport deserves some credit for pushing boundaries and maybe they had to be talked into it, and maybe it took a star like Ronda Rousey to get them to that point. But that's amazing. That's worth celebrating, and I really do think that's cool. But yeah, I mean, I don't think Amanda Nunes, who again, to be perfectly honest, is a gay athlete. So I think that's amazing that she's one of the faces of the sport. Is a married woman to her partner. And I mean, I'll say right now, the most fun I've ever had at a fight was actually a John Jones and Alexander Gustafsson. They were in LA, and they were supposed to fight in Vegas, but there was sort of a drug test issue, so they moved it to California. So all the tickets, this wasn't your typical Vegas card. The tickets were like $120 because they wanted to sell out, and they only had 4 days to do it. So you had a real just normal people. And the co-main there was Amanda Nunes versus Chris Cyborg. And it lasted about 90 seconds. And I've never felt a crowd at a fight like that. The entire thing was action. And it did not matter that they were women or men. It was the fight. And that's cool. And I think that when I say I have problems with the culture of the sport, that's something that I think is worth celebrating.
Well, which is really cool is we've gone 10 minutes about a topic that I didn't even write down.
It's worth noting. I have no notes here. You just said we're going to talk about it. You said we're talking about everything.
We're talking about everything. Could I talk to you about basketball? Could we get into the NBA?
Let's do it. Yeah. You actually, something you were saying in your intro about Batman and the resting players really got me thinking, because I was talking last night with someone about the load management in the NBA and how much as a hardcore, I mean, basketball is my favorite sport. It's what I played growing up. The Raptors are my favorite team in professional sports. Always have been. I'm one of those idiots who spent several $100s on a replica championship ring. And I find the NBA borderline unwatchable this year.
But they're not the same, though. Load management and trade-related reasons are not the same. Do you not find it a little more palatable, a little more appealing that, we're going to maintain his workload so he's ready to go in the postseason? That seems like a credible, discussion or a credible conversation to have. I know it's spun a little out of control from that, though.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously credible. No question here. And I'm not one of those people who's going to say, oh, they fly private, all of that. Basketball on your joints and your knees in particular is incredibly difficult on the body. So I understand that. My issue is, as a consumer, as a sports fan, if I live in Chicago and my kid's favorite player is Kawhi Leonard, and I'm going to unload $250 a ticket to bring my kids there, and there's no guarantee that Kawhi is going to play, I think that's a problem. And I think that
he's the epicenter of this conversation.
I mean, the Clippers are the ones that basically started it. Although he sat a lot when he was with the Raptors for that year too. But it's happening too much. And look, the NBA makes enough money that I think that they need to consider going to 65 or 70 games. And, having...
Well, I think the NHL could do that. I think Major League Baseball could cut down. That to me, you hit the nail on the head. What worries me is that you almost become, if you're a struggling team or your team's having a bad year, you might become that place that, we're not going to play in Calgary, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, and you won't see those guys, right?
Totally. And stars drive sports. Right. I mean, especially in the NBA.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a real issue. And to be honest, I don't think it's happening in hockey. Like the load management thing just is not. It's not.
It's this trade. I think it's the Jacob Chikrin thing, right? I think he's a good defenseman. He needs to play. He should play. This is a little silly. Like if you're close to a deal,
But we're just going to sit a guy for an extended period because they might get traded and we want to protect the asset. Yeah, that stinks. But it's not as bad as what's happening in the NBA. It's just not. And I honestly, I mean, whenever we have these sort of bigger picture discussions, I do think that inevitably someone will look at the English Premier League model and you start looking at the soccer and you say, oh, well, relegation is part of the solution. It's not in North America. There's too much money involved. But a shorter season, look, the NFL makes more money per game than anyone because it's a shorter season and every single game matters.
It's an event. Every single game is an event.
Exactly. And that is ultimately, and the Premier League has 38 games. They also have cup competitions on the side, which are cared about in a very real way. But something has to be done. And I'm not necessarily saying with hockey. I think that it would benefit hockey, but I don't think it's going to happen. Hockey is still so reliant on every penny right now. Whereas the NBA, we're talking, they're saying that maximum salary is maybe $80 million. I mean, there is money. You can switch things around and have a new vision that would work and that wouldn't bankrupt anybody.
Yeah.
You'd still be making loads more money than just about anyone in professional sports outside of the NFL.
That's the hard part about talking about North American sports in particular, but I'm sure, major sports around the world is it's hard to, and I think I said this to you before, I'm all for capitalism. I get it. I understand it. But man, money ruins everything.
It sure does.
Right? Like the minute are sports more fun today because we're cap conscious and we're salary cap conscious? I think it takes away from, the fundamental growth of sport as heroes. But now we've said, well, he gets $8 million, or to your point, like, well, LeBron makes $80 million. Nobody should make doctors. It just, the money part of it gets out of control so much. And the NBA is about to go through this with the television deals that are coming.
100%. And what needs to be, it's why I think that it's such a pressing conversation when it comes to that league is shortening the season.
Yeah.
Because now is the time to do it.
Yeah.
You have these TV deals. Sports are the last thing that reliably bring in an audience on traditional television over the air, right? So the money is going to be astronomical. And I do want to be clear, I have no problem with players making $80 million. If it's going to go into the pockets of the players or the owners,
sure.
I'm saying give it to the players,
Sure.
But the question is, if you were looking at it from a consumer as a fan,
right,
you don't want that situation where people are spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in some markets to go to a game, and they're not getting to see the players they want to see.
The NBA is not going to go to Nate Silver and go, you know what? Maybe we should have load management pricing. So if LeBron comes to your city and he doesn't play, we should lower the ticket price.
No,
not going to happen. Not going to happen. You're going to pay the same price.
Well, right? I mean, and the reality is,
or you are paying
for the
price. Right.
No, you're probably paying more. I mean, if you look at most of these ticket packages,
that's true.
The Golden State Warriors are, as a road team, are going to just attract a higher dollar point than any other team in the NBA.
Yeah.
Now, Golden State doesn't really do the load management thing as much, so they're not that. I don't want to use them as the example, but that's the reality. For the stars, you are paying more, and you're not getting a guarantee that they played. How does that?
Well, to me, Golden State's a good example because to me, it should be mandated that if Golden State sits Curry, then Steve Kerr's got to do a press conference for the entire crowd and let him talk for 10, 15 minutes. It's worth it right there. You'll get your money back in that conversation, right?
I mean, I'm down with, let's get Daryl Sutter out doing 15-minute press conferences for the entire Saddledome crowd.
Yeah.
That would be.
Yeah, there's some who would enjoy it. I know one guy who wouldn't enjoy it. Daryl would not like that at all. Okay, so UFC, NBA, and still not a single topic I wrote down. I'm going to trip you up. Can we talk about yesterday's announcement of the CP Open coming to Earl Grey in 2024?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's amazing. I honestly, I'm
for a city that doesn't get a lot right now, that's struggling to get big events and struggling, this is huge.
For sure. I mean, I was in Regina a couple years ago when the same event was there, and it was amazing, the energy of the city. I'm not a huge golf guy, if I'm being perfectly honest with you.
Yeah.
But, Calgary is, when I moved here in 2000, I guess technically I moved to Calgary in 2011, but Alberta in 2010.
Yeah.
The reason why I was open and excited about it was this reputation for hosting international sporting events.
Yeah.
I grew up in downtown Toronto. We had all the North American, other than NFL, Big Four. Like, I'd done that.
Oh, you had a little bit of NFL.
We had, I couldn't afford tickets as a 21-year-old. I'll tell you that. We had the Bills when the Bills were bad. It was
right. Exactly. Not this Bills.
No, they're not giving us Josh Allen.
No, not that Bills.
No, but I hadn't really had that opportunity to go see Olympic Olympic sport. And it's been one of the things that I love about living here. So I don't know, for them to be bringing it again, it puts the spotlight on Calgary. I am one of those people, I've spoken openly. One of my frustrations with McMahon Stadium right now is that despite all the issues, we're seeing soccer blow up. It would be very cool to have 1 or 2 international games a year for the men's team, and hopefully the same for the women's team. Broadcast. It just shows such an amazing side of the city that is here and that exists and that can thrive. So unequivocally a win for Calgary getting that event. And I'd love to see at some point. I don't know if we have a course that's actually PGA, is doable, but I would love to see, our Canadian Open on the men's side come to Alberta at some point.
What about a Live Tour event? I'm trying so desperately to trip you up, but you hit everything.
If a Live Tour came, I can tell you that I wouldn't be the one covering it. I guess we all have a price. If they want to, no, I wouldn't do it. There's no world. You saw that. Do you see the ratings this weekend?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But people don't go to the CW for sports.
That's
right?
true. I'm just actively rooting.
But less than 300,000 people watching those events.
Exactly.
But they don't care.
Of course they don't care. Of course they don't care. It's the same thing with the XFL.
No,
I'm biting my tongue on Twitter to not say I told you so to the media members who were advocating that the CFL and XFL should merge. But I'm sorry, their tradition is what makes you care.
Shouldn't have merged, but shouldn't they have had more of a robust conversation? That I always felt that when that came up, it was like, okay, cool. The Rock, you should have time to listen to The Rock. But I felt like, and you were in the middle of it, so you can correct me on this, but standing on the outside, it looked to me like it just got shouted down from all sides.
I don't think it got shouted down from Bell. I think Bell, which is one of the principal owners of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, which is without question the most powerful sporting organization in this country. And I mean, I guess I shouldn't say without question, in my opinion, is the most powerful. I mean, they were on board, and
for now.
But so I do think that and MLSE is obviously a very powerful partner with the CFL, and as is Bell.
Are they a partner?
At this point, I think you have to wonder, but I mean, they're willing to lose a lot of money. As someone, again, who was born and raised in Toronto, I care about the Argonauts and would love to see them succeed and would love to see them get serious investment. I don't think it's ever going to happen. But yeah, I mean, I think that the XFL thing, I think there was a push. Depending on who you talk to, I will say that part of that push, I believe, came from Calgary as well. But I think that ultimately, for those who don't know, I mean, the CFL, the structure is that there are 3 community-owned teams, and those teams were, my impression was absolutely not on board. And let's be perfectly honest with you, the XFL, if I was running the XFL, the markets I would have been interested in are Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. They're the big TV markets, all of that. And those are the weakest CFL markets. Although Edmonton, over the last couple of years, is right there with them.
Which is unbelievable to me.
Unbelievable to me as well. But I've been in the stadium. I'm sorry.
No. I'm calling into question your facts.
There's real trouble there. But that's what's interesting about it is I don't know. I don't think that the XFL would have, it's the XFL, it's American football. I don't think it would have made a lick of difference in those markets.
But isn't that under the assumption, Danny, that they were going to come in and dictate the terms? If it was a true partnership, if it was a true back and forth, could there not have been more of a CFL influence into what the product has become now? And I got to be honest with you, I haven't watched a lick of it yet. And I was there when it launched the first 2 times. This time it's just like,
and this time, I mean, the truth is, look, I have no idea if The Rock is qualified to run a sports league, but he's been successful at a lot of different things. I'd argue he doesn't make very many good movies, despite the perception that
volume.
Good job quitting the Fast and Furious franchise there, buddy. That was really smart. So I think they clearly have smart people, and to be honest, I actually know, because I know people who are in sort of the sports data business, who say that the XFL's people, they brought in very smart, qualified people to run that league. So I mean, as a CFL fan, I'm not rooting against it, but I'm not going to be promoting it by any means. I'll tell you that much. And look, I hear you. The CFL has real problems. I mean, it sounds as if they've got an ownership group that's sort of coming in Montreal. But there was a moment within the last couple of weeks where I thought Montreal might not be able to actually field a team in 2023.
Yeah.
Like anyone who downplays the serious financial challenges that are facing the CFL is crazy. That doesn't mean that it's not worth fighting for, or not building, or important, or probably my favorite sport to cover.
Yep.
But yeah, in that sense, I guess that they should have been investigating every option. But I still believe that, and I fundamentally, and it's why I argued very vocally against any sort of merger.
Mm-hmm.
I would have needed to know that the XFL was sincere in taking leadership from the CFL. Because the CFL, if there's one thing that it's done, it's put football on the field every year, with the exception of the pandemic, year after year after year. And the XFL hasn't proven that it can do that.
No.
So they wouldn't be, you can't let them call all the shots.
Yeah.
No matter if people think the CFL is a joke or not, it does one thing, and that's survive. The XFL hasn't proven it can survive.
If I made you commissioner for a day, is there something that's not being done right now? Is there something that nobody's paying attention to that could improve the fortunes of the clubs right away?
There's a lot of things. There are a lot of things. I just don't think that the league, I think that the league needs more content, and I think the league needs more people producing that content. And I think the league ultimately.
So you'd like to see two broadcasters?
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Without question, I would like to see two broadcasters. I'd like to see competition. And I'll say I don't really, this is going to get me in trouble, but I don't really care.
I certainly don't care.
No. I think the TSN's commitment to covering the league on a day-to-day basis has really declined over the past couple of years. And this is not a knock on the individual reporters, many of whom I know would love to be at practice more often. But I honestly think that when it comes to that, they show up the day before the game and they get their interviews for the broadcast. But how often do you see the CFL on SportsCenter? Really, you don't see it as much as you used to.
It's the chicken and the egg, though, isn't it, Danny? Because I'm sure there's people at Bell, because I know there's people at Rogers that would tell you, the data doesn't support the coverage, right? We don't get the views, we don't get the impressions, we don't get the but it's a chicken and egg thing too, because I truly believe that Bedard sold out the Dome a couple weeks ago because of the World Junior Tournament. He was here in the fall and there was 3,000 people. He was here last year. There was 3,000 people, but it meant something when he was on that tournament, which TSN built, curated, it's the greatest example of a broadcast science experiment that went right.
And absolutely. And I do think that, the coverage, to be honest, I also think that the CFL head office needs to invest more in getting its product out there. And I think that there needs to just be more video, more written word.
Well, and I'll say it to you so you don't have to. It'd be kind of cool if you hung around for both teams' press conferences at the Grey Cup.
I do agree. But I'll say, let's talk about sports media in Calgary right now.
Let's talk about it.
It has been for the past 2 years. It has been myself, Mark Steven from 770, and Matt Rose, who are the only 3 media people there. That was not true 3 to 4 years ago. Now you have tons of good people, Glenn at CTV, Cammy at Global, who show up as often as they can, and they
but it's not their mandate.
It's not their mandate, and I'm actually not criticizing that. But people need to realize, when I say more content, I'm actually not referring specifically to the broadcast partner or the head office or anything. No. I'm saying that right now we have way less media in Calgary, which has been a challenging market historically for the CFL. It had a really good 20-year run through Wally Bono, obviously the Flutie years, right, really through till about 2014. But this market is not what it was even when I started covering the team in 2016. And a big part of that is just I'm sorry, if you don't follow one of me, Mark, or Maddie, you're not getting any real information. And I don't know how you resolve that, because you're not fixing what's going on in Canadian sports media particularly easily.
No, you're not. I think there's opportunities in Canadian sports media.
Well, it's what you guys are doing here. Right. I see it, and I think it's amazing, right?
Yeah. But it's going to take a while for it to grow roots and to flourish to what it needs to be. Behind you is a Bo Levi Mitchell jersey, which leads me to the question: is part of this that the players themselves, and chicken the egg, I don't know, but I'm not sure that right now I can name 5 Stampeders.
I certainly can.
Of course you can. But Bo Levi Mitchell's kind of the last of the big name, carries some weight in the community, don't you think? Or am I wrong about that?
No, I think you're probably right. I mean, I think that Bo was certainly the guy who, it's NHL playoffs, who you put it on the big screen at the Saddle Dome, because he's out there. It's Bo, and he's the one who everyone's going to know, and I will say, I mean, Alex Singleton, who hasn't been here for a couple of years, still also held that connection. I thought a guy like Tremere Thurman was really making waves there, and was just such a leader. So I'm really disappointed to see him sign with Hamilton. And there are certainly beloved players within the fan community of that team, because it's been, and this is going to sound corny, I don't mean it to, but like the greatest joy of covering the Stampeders for me was the Twitter, the fan community there was so positive, so encouraging. I was not very good at the start, and they were patient and helped me out. And then eventually, I've gone to weddings with these people, with these Stampeders fans who I met on Twitter, and
that's why it matters.
Exactly,
and that's why it's important, and that's why it's worth fighting for.
Completely,
right?
There is a community there that's real and that's fun, and it needs to get younger. It needs to get more diverse. But I will say, I mean, when I started in 2016, and I think it was there 2017, I didn't have a car at the time, so I often, when I couldn't bike, would take the C train, and I'd get off at Banff Trail Station, and they had these big cutouts of the players, whether it was Jerome Messam, whether it was whatever, with their numbers, their names, kids could take pictures. Like, it was a whole fun. That's not there anymore. So I don't know whose fault it is that people like you probably couldn't name 5, but I think,
by the way, I will by May. I promise you. I'll know most of them by May.
Totally, but that's real. I don't see the same level of visibility for the Stampeders that I used to. The pandemic made that incredibly hard. There are budget issues. I get that, but like,
I partially lay it at the feet of kind of I think they thought it was the maturation of the professionalism of the league. They increased it, and they went away from a little bit like mom and pop to, we got to run it like the Flames, and there's availabilities, and there's rights holders, and there's all of these sort of things. But you rob the people of getting to know these guys. Their strength was always getting to know.
They're
Nick
the best
Lewis
guys.
And Jermaine Copeland, and on it goes, right?
Yeah.
Like, they are the best, and they've got stories. They got great, and they're happy to be here in most cases.
I am not kidding you.
Yeah.
Covered the team since 2016. Yeah. I'm not going to name him. There is one player who I didn't like in my years covering.
Randy Chevrier? Was it Randy Chevrier?
What a jerk Randy Chevrier is. Exactly. No, I mean, I'm not going to name him because that would be unprofessional. No, but I genuinely, and like, they're a guy like Malik Henry, their top receiver last year, not great with the media. Came up and apologized to me. He was just like, I'm just not comfortable doing it. Yeah. He said, I promise you, I'm a nice guy. And I was like, cool. Like, that's all I need. It's okay if you're a little bit shy or nervous. Like, that's the type of thing that you get with the Stampeders. And I do think you're saying it right. I can't disagree. It is about, I think that if people got to know the players, they would fall back in love with this.
Well, I think the guy that could be, what Wally Warner was in this town, I think Craig could be in this town. Or Dave could be in this. Craig had his chance, he left. Dave is charismatic. Dave is personable. Dave is a nice guy. He's a leader. He just doesn't have the same platform that Wally had, because there isn't 3 newscast or sportscasts that, there isn't 11 o'clock sportscast. There isn't 9 stations with radio, sportscasts and stuff like that. Wally was out there. Dave can be that guy.
Oh, I'll tell you a Dave Dickinson story. Last year, I was covering hockey playoffs. Obviously, the Flames made the second round. That meant that I wasn't there for training camp. But Flames were on the road. I wasn't traveling to Edmonton, so decided I wanted to just pop by a practice. Dave Dickinson, during training camp practice, walked off the field, shook my hand, asked how I was doing, and then came and introduced me to every new person, not player, but staff member at the stadium. Every single one of them, and just wanted me to like know who they were, make sure that they knew who I was.
Yeah.
That's smart, but it's beyond that. It's just good person stuff. Like, that's what I love about Dave Dickinson. And I've said it. I think he should be commissioner at some point. I honestly, I think he's the key to all of it, because he understands, he gets it. He gets that, yes, he's a football coach, but he's also on some level the face of the franchise. He understands that it's connecting with young players.
Yeah.
Dave Dickinson is a huge asset for CSEC and for the Stampeders, and whether it's them or whoever, they got to figure out how to.
They got to unleash him.
Yeah,
unleash him on this city.
Yeah.
Let him go wild.
He may hate us for saying this. If he ever hears this,
he
might
won't,
be
no.
like,
Yeah. That's what he really wants to do.
Yeah.
I'd really like to spend more time out with Cracker Jacks like Rob. No, I know what you're saying.
But
okay, so we touched one thing that I wrote down.
Okay.
And we didn't even get to all of that one thing. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the local hockey heroes. 2 days away from the trade deadline. You've been around them. Last night, I retweeted you. I don't even know what to say anymore. That was a world-class performance against a juggernaut team that may set an NHL record. That if you had watched if somebody said, this is the first hockey game you're going to watch it. Tell me who's going to set the record for wins this year. They would have got it wrong. But it was so on brand this year for the way they lost. It's amazing.
If that game was in November, every single one of us would be feeling very confident that the Flames are going to get it together and go on a run.
Or last year. Yeah. Right? That looked like last year's.
100%.
Yeah.
I thought they were great.
Yeah.
Look, Dan Vladar, you got to not allow those 2 goals. Zadorov, you can't be like that. That hit was dumb.
But he was trying. Like
I know
it's effort, right?
Completely.
Like it's not because of lack of caring. He's the guy that took the responsibility for the loss on Saturday.
Totally. I'm not trying to bash Zadorov, but like it was a bad play in my opinion. But
it would almost be easier if he was dumb or stupid or he was just being an idiot or something. He wasn't.
No. But I was trying to think back this morning as I lay in bed, being like, how do I? Because I can occasionally be soft on the teams that I cover.
Yeah.
But so I was like, am I giving them too much credit here? And I think that the 2017 Grey Cup, where the Stampeders lost to the Argos, and
same thing.
Well, those are the 2 games that I've ever covered. They were 1 and 2 on my list of like, I don't know how the team that I cover lost. The Flames were so much better. The fact that Boston's coach is being like, yeah, I feel pretty bad for the Flames after that one. That's crazy. There's so much anger around this team right now.
Yep.
And I get it. And especially with the trade deadline, there's all this pressure and all that. That's just not a game I can get angry about. That's just a game where I don't know, man. The hockey gods just weren't smiling on them. And that's not making excuse. I will say, if Dan Vladar is not giving you demonstrably better goaltending than Jacob Markstrom, I think you have to ride Markstrom for the rest of the year. You got to put him in there. I'm sorry. He's the guy you're paying. He's the guy with the higher upside. If he doesn't find it, he doesn't find it. But I don't think there's any real difference between the two.
Do you manufacture a way to bring Wolf up?
No. I understand why people are saying it. You're paying these guys. And I'm a believer that, I mean, if they make a move to try to get into the 8th seed over the next couple of days, I don't like that.
I think they might. I'm in that camp that not to say I told you so or anything like that. I just don't want to, like I've seen it, I get the same Twitter stuff, they need to not blow it up, but this isn't their year. And I think that's true. I think this is not a blow up situation. This is keep your powder dry, finish off, do what you can, start over again next year.
Other teams don't have the cap space to take on the contracts for the Flames to blow it up. It's not actually
but it's easy when you don't have to make those financial decisions, right?
Yes.
Yeah, blow it up. And it was actually on the barn burner this morning, and Ryan started trotting out these numbers of where they were last year as a pairing and where they are this year. That's the part I can't reconcile in my head. I don't know how you fall off a cliff. Now, I think there's a lot of people that want to point to the Oilers series and say, well, that damaged Markstrom. Okay. And we're only 3 weeks away from Dan Vladar having the Flames record for consecutive games with points. But here we are. And
that's it. It just hasn't come together. And I mean, I started covering this team this year in mid-November because I was on Stamps, and where we don't have the staff to have to ultimately have me at both. But I came in and it just always felt like the turnaround was a week away or a game away. It always felt like it was around the corner because there is too much talent. And ultimately, I do think you look back at it and look, if the goaltending was better, this team would be in the playoffs right now. That's not the only problem. You also should be getting more than 3 goals on.
I think the offense is getting a little bit of a break here. I think the offense, you're generating 57 shots and the requisite scoring chances to go with that. Something's got to go in. There's a lot of bodies getting hit in front, and there's a lot of goalies with bruises on their bellies because they're hitting.
Lucic hit the post yesterday. It was a couple weeks ago. Who did they lose to in overtime here? Philly. Coleman hit the post.
Yeah.
Like there's just been a lot of an inch the other way, and that's sports. You can't make the excuses, but I mean, the question as to how it relates to the trade deadline, I heard it was Elliot Friedman talking about how, look, you have to look at how many contracts expire after next season, and those have a lot of value. Oh, we got an emergency alert here.
Okay.
Should probably check that. Oh, it's a test. It's a test.
It's a test. Is that our phones?
It's a test. Yeah.
Okay. Don't anybody move. Just stay where you are. Continue to listen to this podcast. We'll get you through it.
I mean, I assume if that was a real Amber Alert, we would have taken 10 seconds to read it, but it was just a test. So
it's just a test.
It's just a test. We're still good citizens. But yeah, I also see that argument that ultimately, like, if you don't think Lindholm is going to sign after next year, I'm sure at this point management wants to know that. And that's something you could get a lot of assets for. So if you lose to the Leafs tomorrow night and you wake up Friday morning, I think that they're as
Do you think that's possible?
I don't think it's impossible.
See, to me, it was they'll try to get something. They'll go big game hunting, but the big game's gone. All the big games is gone, unless you want Jacob Chikrin. Now they'll just do the Forborts and the Gustafsson trades. Then they're not going to do anything, and then they're going to trade Matt Phillips. I had never gone into, because I think the guys on the Barn Burner, weren't they talking about Mangiapane this morning? Sorry, Toffoli. Oh, no. Internet, stand down. Stand down, Internet. Stand down.
Well, and I do think that a lot of that came from that Elliot Friedman. The emergency alert is just going on.
Came from Elliot Friedman.
And I do think that a lot of that got people thinking, because that's what he was saying.
Yeah.
And the question, do I think they're going to do it? No, I don't think that they're about to blow this up. I don't think that that's what Daryl Sutter wants. And to be perfectly honest with you, you signed a lot of guys to long-term contracts who you're not going to be unloading. And realistically, Nazem Kadri wasn't signing here if he was told that they were going to be doing a rebuild. No. So you owe it to those players to continue going for it.
I think it's a fascinating timeline for Brad Treliving, because he had it blow up in his face, rightfully, wrongfully. I'm one of these guys that you can tell me all about hospitals in Columbus and all of that. Sorry, you don't leave $15 million in a year on the table if you're happy somewhere. No. Gaudreau left because he wasn't happy here. Kachuk left because he wasn't happy here. The building, the constant humming in the middle and being safe and never being the best and all of that. I think it wears on. I think they love the city. I think they love the people. I think the staff's great and all of that stuff. But I think right now, maybe the building's most of it. Maybe the facilities are most of it. But you're going to have a hard time keeping and attracting people until it's a new building.
And we're going to get the new building. I mean, I think.
Do you think so?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if they're going to announce it tomorrow, but I think it's on its way. The money's like
8-part audio documentary in 2011 about the new building coming. 8-part. Wow. Last segment was Ken King talking about in the next couple of years, the shovels will go in the ground. I want to believe. But having said that, oh, by the way, today's the first day they started discussing about the field house now, too. That's right. Oh, I'm 53 years old. That's only been the biggest civic priority in this city for 54 years, right? And we glossed over it. But who's talking about the building where you go almost all summer?
Oh, no, right? McMahon, it's brutal. Well, I mean, if we want to go down that path, I mean, the Olympic Oval is not modern.
My understanding is it's now 35 years past its due date.
Yep.
Does that sound about right? And they've done
you have the numbers, but I believe you. Yeah.
Mark Messer over there has done, and his staff have done an amazing job of keeping that thing relevant. The other thing I didn't know, that was the first time in Winter Olympic history that the speed skating was indoors. I didn't realize that. And then the next Winter Olympics, they were back outdoors.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we have one truly world-class sports facility here, and that's Spruce Meadows. But everything at WinSport, I mean, we don't have a bobsleigh track anymore. Like the sports facilities, the elite sports facilities in this city are not what they need to be. I mean,
so why is that? And this is Rob trying to win a fight, and you didn't start it, but I contend, and it's been taken by some people. They bought into it, and there's others who haven't. We need a freaking hero. This city needs somebody to stand up. And I had Dr. David Lagon from MRU, and he listed off some incredible people. You and I have talked. There are some incredible people in this city. Lots of leaders and stuff like that. But there's no Frank King. There's no, and I'm trying to think of some other names through history. But we're such a tribal society now. There's nobody that can stand up and unite pro and con, whatever we want to call it. And to me, fantastic. We got the CP and we got the Shaw Charity. We're nibbling around the sides, and then you're comfortable. We're going to get an arena. I think we're going to get an arena, but tell me about the field house. And Edmonton's got what, 3 field houses?
I mean, doesn't Moose Jaw have one?
Yep.
Yeah.
No. Kamloops does. Regina, Saskatoon.
Yeah,
right?
we've got it out at Shoaldice. There's the dome field.
And there's some people trying that. This is not dumping on the city, but at some point, somebody's got to stand up and say enough is enough. Either we're world class or we're not world class. And if we're going to be world class, we got to have the facilities. They're building pieces and stuff like that, but link them all together here, people. Yeah. Right? Link them all together here.
I mean, we know our emergency
alert system is best in class.
Yeah.
You are amazing. So next time you come on, I'm going to try to trip you up with Australian rules football. Maybe I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to blindside you before we go. And I mentioned it. A peer of yours. I thought it's must read today. Derek Van Dies's column on the Canada soccer problems go deeper than Dr. Nick Bontes. Do you want to just touch on that? Because that to me is maybe the biggest non-mainstream story in sport in our country right now because of how far we have come and how quickly we could fall.
Yeah. And I'm not going to be careful, but I mean, the truth is it's a hard issue to sort of understand.
It's complicated.
It was a complicated issue. And obviously there was this agreement basically to create the Canadian Premier League. That has severely hampered the amount of money that Soccer Canada has. They did not anticipate what happened with the men's team.
Yep.
And the revenues that was going to bring in, and then they're not getting all those revenues back, and they're not able to invest it. You can very comfortably make the argument that how could they have seen that? But too bad, you made a mistake.
If they didn't listen, there would have been if people saw it coming, there would have been competition.
Completely.
Bell, Rogers, whoever would have been there in on that too.
Exactly.
Right.
But ultimately what it comes down to is right now, our women's team is preparing for the World Cup and they don't have the resources that they need. We are one of the richest countries in the world.
Yep.
We should, our team should not be, our women's team should have the same resources that the men's team does.
Yep.
They've won an Olympic gold medal. Christine Sinclair is a national icon. It does not make sense that in that position, and it doesn't make sense that there was a deal made where there's not more money. It doesn't. And it's embarrassing. And there should be multiple international friendlies in Canada. It's the spring in Canada in the build up to this World Cup with our women who are, if you're a soccer fan, are household names. Maybe they're not household names everywhere, but certainly if you're a soccer fan, they are. And it's the fact that it's not happening. When we qualified for the World Cup, you can go back and look. I actually tweeted long before any of this stuff broke that this was the players qualified, not Soccer Canada. And I continue to sort of believe that. But there is money. And where is that money? It's a question that needs to be asked. I do want to ask you one question before we go.
Please.
I give you 3 statues, sports statues.
Yeah.
You can build them wherever you want in the city. That's not the question.
Yeah.
But you get 3 Calgarians, athletes, sports figures. Who do you build?
I build
people always say Jerome McGinley. I'm sorry you didn't win a championship, so you're not getting a statue in my book.
That's an interesting answer. So let me start it off this way. I would build a statue to Frank King.
Okay.
Because I think Frank King, and we may be putting this on him, but Frank King represents what we want our Calgary to be. Frank King represents the can-do volunteerism, get her done. Like, trust me, 88 is not a family story. There were some things happen there to get her done, right? That, we're just going to not talk about, but we got her done. Mm-hmm. So Frank would be, I think, right there. I would build one.
You can say again, I was mostly
no. But I'm just trying to think of, because I'm afraid that I'm going to apply it to the wrong person. Cassie Campbell-Pascal.
Love that.
Because Cassie broke down barriers in broadcasting. Cassie did so much in our community for Ronald McDonald House, for other charities. Cassie didn't take it real well when they said, you can't because you're a woman, and that's not what women do. And I think, Katrina LeMay Doan, Cheryl Bernard, I think this city has just a plethora of really good female sports leaders. And because she's in my orbit, I'm going to give Cassie that pick. But I think we have to recognize that.
I love that.
And then Eddie Whalen. And it's hard because I want to say Peter Marr because of what Pete brought. But Eddie Whalen did as much to let the world know about Calgary as anybody. And Eddie Whalen cared about minor sports. And Eddie Whalen, yes, Stampede Wrestling, absolutely. And I have a bent that way.
I was going to ask about Bret Hart. I
went older, though.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
That's
so my assumption is
there's no right or wrong answer.
We're building a leadership park, a park about leaders. And those are my first 3 statues. Now, when you come back next time, likely Friday, I will add to my park. What about you? You answer that question.
I would have Bret Hart, to be perfectly honest with you.
No.
He's just, that's also, I'm 38. I was a kid in Bret Hart's prime.
Yeah.
I wasn't really allowed to watch wrestling, but the TV was in the basement, so
yeah.
I just would sneak it on and watch wrestling.
Yeah.
And I just, to be honest, I think that all of us, even if you're not a hardcore wrestling fan, if you were at the time, you're probably a little protective of Bret Hart.
Dude was the most popular male athlete in Germany in 1994. Same thing in India. Who else in this city did
amazing,
that?
Right?
That's
the thing. It's amazing. I don't know that I have better answers than yours. And I don't know, like with the Flames, like it sort of has to be Lanny. If you were to pick a Flame, I think it has.
Again, Lanny, because of what Lanny means to the community, and because what he gave us that look. Yep. Everybody knew where that mustache came from. Everybody knew where 99 was. Everybody knew where the mustache was.
Yep.
And the fact that, the Special Olympics are announcing the Canadian Winter Games are coming to Calgary today. Not today, but they're coming next year. Today, they're announcing that. But it's the Flames alumni and Lanny at the lead of that when he was a player that went into the community and helped forge and still has those connections today.
Exactly.
I think it's a brilliant pick.
And then I've got to do a Stampeders one because of who I am. And that's where it gets interesting.
So you screwed me on the number.
Okay.
Because if you gone to 5, Wally, I would have put Wally in there because of everything, but particularly the quarterbacks. And then I'd put Peter Marr back in there too.
Yep. Well, and that's the thing. I'm not necessarily picking my 3. I'm just going through who. And that's the thing. For me, it's like one of the coolest things about covering the St. Peter's was, when Sugarfoot Anderson died, Nick Lewis wanted to talk about how cool Sugarfoot was and stuff like that. So
100%.
I know that history. So guys like Sugarfoot and Wayne Harris, and I don't think Flutie was here for long enough, but as someone growing up in Toronto, Flutie is who I associated with the Stampeders. And then to be honest, like, there's only one quarterback who won 2 Grey Cups.
Yep.
And I don't think Bo is that bad.
Nope.
Is that bad an option? So
I think he becomes that. I think it's too early, but he becomes that.
People will appreciate it
100%.
Eventually. So, yeah.
You were so much fun. Will you do this again?
Literally anytime.
Okay.
Literally.
Danny, they can follow you on Twitter at DannyAustin9. You're still on the Flames beat. Stamp stuff coming. Thank you so much. It was, honest to God, I wrote all these notes and I'm pretty sure the same thing's going to happen with our next guest, but whenever I can do that, I feel great. This was awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Cheers.
There you go. Danny Austin from Post Media. That was so much fun. We are live, by the way, in the Oodle Noodle studio. Local, love, delicious. Since opening their first store back in 2005, Oodle Noodle has been all flavor and just the right amount of weird. I love that. 2 locations, 1244 17th Avenue Southwest, 105 Main Street North in Airdrie, pickup and delivery. And the best part about this new gig is we don't have to wait. We get to go from one great guest to another great guest. We crossed paths a number of times in different arenas, watched him as a junior, watched him as a pro. We've got some mutual friends. We were just talking about guys who made a difference in Calgary. Well, he's got some great Calgary connections. And my guess is when it's all said and done, in Wales, they might build a statue for him. Very pleased to have join us today. Brody Dupont, everybody. Brody, the head coach now of the Cardiff Devils of the Elite Ice Hockey League. Brody, can you hear me all the way in Wales today?
Yeah, it's coming through. I don't know if I have a bad echo here or not, but
Nope, you're good.
Sadly didn't have a microphone other than my daughter's karaoke microphone, so I didn't think that would be a fitting for the podcast.
Listen, I appreciate you doing this. You're right in the middle of things right now. If I look at the table, third in the league. Where are you at in your season, and what lays ahead for you and the Devils?
See, the big thing about the difference of this league is the league is the big one you want. You want to win that regular season. So to be in the conversation at this time of the year, that's massive for our club. Cardiff, for people who don't know what they're about, basically there's actually a Calgary-based ownership group, and they have a history of winning. So that was a really big opportunity for me to come here and play as a player, and then to give me the opportunity as a coach meant a lot. And right now this season, we're chasing down that league title. We're right there in the mix of things. There's four of us at the top that have kind of separated ourselves. And, it's been a lot of fun. It's a bit different coaching, but, you learn on the fly, and still to be a part of the game has been so much fun.
The bulk of this conversation is going to be about the Devils and your journey. But I do want to just take it, because right now, as you know, in North America, we are all wrapped up in the NHL trade deadline and who's going where. And that does that hockey news, does that permeate? Are you guys, are you coaches talking about it, or you North American players? Are you guys invested in what goes on at the National Hockey League in a day-by-day basis?
Yeah, I mean, we follow it. We all have ties to home. We have quite a North American room. We have 6 British players, and the rest are from North America. So we have 15 imports, and they're all from North America. You come in the room, the hockey highlights are on, NHL's buzzing. We start a little bit earlier, so it's kind of strange at the beginning of our training camp because the NHL hasn't began yet. So it's just kind of this awkward, no TV in the room, watching highlights. Guys are talking, but once the season gets going, we're watching. Certainly saw the Rangers made a couple big moves. I obviously followed them a little bit as well. It's always an exciting time of year with the deadline that looms, and some big moves happen around the league. But it's a point of conversation in the coach's office. Especially when big deals like that are going down. It's exciting time for hockey.
Third round pick of the Rangers back in 2005. Did you ever get a crack at playing in Madison Square Gardens?
Not at MSG. A quick warm up. I went up for a week, and the coffee was still hot when I left to go back to the minors. But the experience was you couldn't replace that feeling. Obviously, for every kid, I was just proud to make it. One cool story about Chris Drury, when I got to play on his line. And after my first shift, he sits me by me on the bench, and he basically just says, "Hey kid, how was that?" I said, "Yeah, it was good. A little nervous, but I'm good." And he basically says, "Well, you're in the NHL record books now. No one could take that from you. So let's just go play some hockey. All right." Sort of calmed me down. Thought it was kind of cool. Great teammate, great leader. And, it was just a great way to kind of get me into the game. But it was up and down real quick, but I enjoyed every second of it.
So what do you think? I mean, they get Kane yesterday, arguably the greatest American player of the modern era, and it already added some pieces. Your former club, they're a going concern in a very tough Eastern Conference.
They've gone from good to dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think now they're going to be true contenders. Patrick Kane's one of those deals. Probably they're looking for a guy that, maybe on the statistical side of things hasn't been having his best year, but it's not necessarily the point per game they're looking for. They're looking for that big goal, and he's done it in big moments. And so they're looking to maybe surround him with a bit more speed maybe than the Blackhawks had. And obviously a bit of a blockbuster move there. So just kind of interesting to see how that all came together. You heard the rumors swirling forever, and for it to come together, it'll be interesting. I mean, the games come on, obviously. The West Coast games are definitely a no-go. East Coast games, you can pop on, at 1 a.m. and catch some games if you're feeling real adventurous. I mean, I got 3 kids at home, so during the hockey season, it's kind of tough because as a coach, what I've learned is sleep is quite sparse anyways. So, you definitely want to manage your time, but we follow the highlights, and it's going to be an interesting playoff. That's for sure.
back to you, and I'm going to work a little bit backwards. We mentioned you were drafted by the Rangers. You played in Calgary. We'll get back to Calgary stories in a bit, but I want to go back to last year, because last year you come to Wales with the intention of playing, but also as a coach too. Tell us what brought you to the team.
Well, I'll start with basically the ownership group is what sold me. I'd been over in Europe for, parts of 8 years, just had our third kid, COVID hit, flights were kind of all over the place, took us maybe 27 hours to get home I live in New Brunswick now in the off seasons. And so it took us quite a journey to get home. And we figured, you know what, if there's going to be anywhere to play next year, I'll be back in North America, obviously on the latter part of my career. We'll see. We'll try to be picky where we go. Cardiff calls, and ultimately I get on the phone with Steve King, who is the head. He's the main financial guy with Todd Kelman, who kind of originally started it. Then they brought in the partners Brian Parker, Kelly Hughes, and Craig Shostak. But Steve just kind of told me a bit about their culture, what they represent, how they treat their players, what kind of opportunities they can offer my family. My kids are going to school. It's an English-speaking country primarily. And obviously all that, just kind of seemed quite appealing. And it was a league that I hadn't tried yet. So we just thought, you know what, there's a player coach position, assistant coach position available. I know I want to get into coaching. I've been looking at this for the past 10, 12 years. I even took some coaching courses when I was playing for the Hitmen. So it's something it's something that I've always known I've wanted to probably do post hockey. And I've journaled, for 10, 12 years. And so I had a good idea. I just didn't expect it to happen the way it did.
You journaled for 10 to 12 years? Tell me about that.
Well, you'd be amazed. You'll go find a hockey player who's played professionally for 15 years, and you'll say, draw me a practice. Give me a practice plan. Because they've had great coaches along the way, no doubt. And a lot of them have forgotten a lot about how the drills have gone, right? So that's one element I would do. I would just detail the drills and how they went down. So that would be one element. The other element would be certain philosophies that I appreciated, and some that I felt were just garbage. So I put down both, though. I thought they were important. Systems that I liked playing, systems that I enjoyed as a player, systems I felt like were effective, systems that I didn't feel like were really that good. And as obviously the years go by, you have to evolve. So systems maybe that I thought were great in Calgary in my junior days, probably, the game's changed. It's faster. You play a little bit more pace. You play a little bit more with speed, and the certain elements of let's say fighting. It's kind of left. So you have 4 lines, and so the game's evolved, and so you have to evolve as well. But I just found it healthy to get my words out of my mind and onto paper. And anytime I got to talk to anyone who was hockey, I would go home later that day and I would jot down just some notes. Eventually I put it together and try to put it in order, but so it would make sense. But I have a lot of jumbled notes, sitting on my computer.
I'm fascinated by this. If you wrote down both sides of the ledger, which was the biggest ledger? Did you concentrate on the things that you would do or the things that you wouldn't want to do as a coach?
I mostly concentrated on the things that I wouldn't want to do.
Really?
Yeah. And simply because I believe the mind is more powerful than the structure. So the big thing for me is motivating my players and having them trust me and believe in me, because let's face it, most of us know the game. We know a lot of us know the X's and O's. A lot of us, have a couple trick face-off plays up our sleeve. Sure. But if your players aren't willing to play for you, you got nothing. You have nothing. And that's kind of been the big thing moving into this year was just making the guys believe in me. A lot of reasons to doubt. First year head coach. I was playing with most of these guys last season. They had me in the locker room. One element I did have, though, was that angle of I knew what buttons to push. I knew how guys sort of worked. But that also presents a challenge in you're going from a teammate to a coach now.
Yep.
And relationships, they evolve. I don't want to say they change, they evolve. And ultimately you're the one calling the shots. You always had an out as a captain. You can send them to the coach, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm the coach, so I make the calls and I realize that. But Rob, the biggest thing is communication. You have to just talk to these guys and whether they agree with you or disagree, you have to talk to them, talking through your thought process, why you're making decisions. And so, you know, it's been a great learning curve for me, sort of at an exponential rate. I feel like I've hit my rhythm. A lot more to learn, but I've hit my rhythm, and I've sort of, you know, established the type of hockey that, you know, I want to play, and how it needs to be done. And you know, so we're playing really well right now. I'm really proud of the guys, and it's our final push, 10 games to go. So we're ready in the hunt.
So, Brody, let me ask you, because in my mind's eye, you played your major, junior, and your pro through a real interesting transition in hockey. You talked about pushing buttons. My guess is you probably played for some hard-ass disciplinarian coaches, but you know, we've seen the game evolve. We've seen the player evolve. Did you see that in real time as a player? Did you see the player, the game, the coaching, the way that a player is dealt with change?
Big time. I was probably at the tail end of that change when I was coming through junior. So yeah, you watch it, you know, you go from anything from the mental part of the game to, you know, how players are taught. You know, players are skilled now. I mean, they're so skilled, and you know, they have more skill than I would have ever had or dreamt of having, you know. But I played a structured game, and I had coaches that, you know, there was none of this. You didn't ever want to go in the coach's office.
Yeah.
You know, that was a bad thing. That was like, if the coach called you in, it felt like you're going to the principal's office, and you know, it wasn't a good feeling. And because you knew usually or normally it wasn't to get, you know, a pat on your butt saying, hey, doing a great job. It was mostly say, hey, you got to get your ass in gear. You know, you got to get going. And so now it's the communication and the level of conversation you have with your players, you know, especially in our league where it's mostly a weekend league. So I have all week to prep, and, you know, you're squeezing in. I might get 12 to 15 meetings a week sometimes, you know, just talking to my players, whether we're doing video, how are things going at home? You know, we have guys that do MBAs, how's schooling going? You know, and you just want to check in. You want to make sure that everything's going well outside of hockey. And, you know, once you handle that, then you could deal with the stuff at the rink. But, you know, there's obviously some teaching that goes on. But, you know, a lot of the time they want to know why. Why are you making this decision? And you better have an answer. And you know, so I work a lot with my staff and my GM, and we talk a lot. And, you know, so they've and the owner might see, the thing about my GM, my ownership group, they back me, right?
Yeah.
When you feel you're backed.
Yeah, that support.
It's very important, right?
Yeah.
It gives me the confidence even more to move forward with, you know, my way of thinking, and you know, the way I want to approach the game and the players, and you know, I want to add to the culture, and I want to add something, though. I don't want to just sit here and be a part of it. I want to add something to the culture, you know, and that's ultimately the goal of being here in Cardiff. And you know, the byproduct is building my resume and you know, see where this takes me.
So let's bring everybody up to speed. You come to Cardiff, you're a player coach. December, you're kind of shut down with an injury, right?
Yeah, at that point, I had kind of had an injury, and so essentially, you know, over in Europe, there's no system, there's no farm system.
Yeah.
So basically, we work with a salary cap, and it just happened. You know, I was taking a good chunk of the salary cap, and I'd been playing through some injury that had just sort of accumulated over the years of being a professional hockey player.
Yeah.
And, sure. and essentially what happened was, you know, they basically at Christmas time, I had received another blow, and you know, just basically they brought a guy in, and they needed some salary cap space. So I get put on the IR, and this kid ends up being a stud, and that was the hope that he can come in and produce more than what I was. And he came in, he did that. But the other side of things was saying, we want to invite you on the bench full time. That's kind of, you know, the one thing about Cardiff is that was their promise. If you come in and things don't work out, we will stand by you. So then I come on, and basically they say, we want to offer you a place on the bench. We don't want to just fire you or send you home. And so basically, there's this new injury, and I get put on the IR, and I essentially just stay on the IR, go on the bench, and there's a coaching change made with 4 weeks to go in the season. And basically they hand the reins over. And that was completely unexpected. Then we go in and we don't win the league title in terms of regular season, but we have a playoff championship weekend. And for people who don't know, it's basically a Final Four weekend like NCAA.
Okay.
So we won it.
Yeah.
And I guess that was sort of my interview.
Okay, you won it. Did you, at that point, were you convinced it's what you wanted to do? Were you prepared to come back? Or were you hoping they were bringing you back at that point?
As a coach?
Yeah.
Yes, I was. I had everything in line to basically formalize my application. And, it was kind of a wild story, the way everything kind of went down. I'm sitting in the room. I'll tell this quick story. I'm sitting in the room,
sure.
So basically what happens is, a lot's happened in my career. I go from playing to not playing.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize how much support you need from outside the hockey world. I'm talking my wife and my kids. And so, my wife is basically at the point, it's I forget when the coaching change happened, but she had basically said, listen, you've been a bit of a wreck up and down, 'cause I was battling with the end of my career. And
yep.
She's like, I just need a day. Do you mind if I go get my hair done and my nails or that sort of thing? And I was like, yeah, no problem, hon. I'll tell you what, we had a long week. I'll wrap my stuff up at the office. I'll head home. I'll grab my youngest. I'll drop you off at the salon, and I'll grab the other kids from school when they get out. Okay, no problem. So we do that, and I'm like, and as I'm returning, I'm thinking to myself, oh, I forgot to print something. So I go back to the office, and my phone's ringing, and it's my GM, and I got my 1-year-old in my arm, and I'm at the office, and I'm printing stuff, and he says essentially, hey, we just let Scaldi go. You're the new head coach.
Yep.
And I was kind of like, what? So I was like, all right, I got to come to your office. First of all, yes, I accept what happened. And, they just felt like a change was needed. And so, we essentially he's like, we're going to address the team tonight at 5 p.m. And I said, Todd, I have all my kids. I don't have a babysitter. So he said, bring them down. We'll get someone to watch them, and we will address the team. It shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. Okay. So, I called my poor wife. I said, that day you're supposed to have, well, things just got a little chaotic. We have, this is a Friday. We play on the Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm thinking, because I was handling, the only thing I wasn't handling by this point was special teams. But so I had to go get a special teams scouting report done for the weekend. I had to go watch a couple extra clips. So, it ended up being quite a long night and long weekend for me, but you're running off adrenaline, and it sort of validated. Do you know when you get up and you're excited to do something, but you're exhausted?
Yep.
I think that validated for me that, yeah, this is something I want to pursue. And as long as it's right for myself and my family, and the situation is a good situation, it's something that I'm going to go after as hard as I can.
How easy, or not easy, but how much easier did it make the retirement portion as a player for you? Right.
Yeah. You have that fear.
Yeah.
Okay. Where am I going to get my coaching job? How do you apply for these coaches? We've had agents our whole life. How do we apply for these? Do I go back to my player agent? Do they represent coaches? Do I have to start as an assistant coach? What level can I start at? What's the money like? Where do we go to begin this journey? What's the best place to put myself? Do I go to an academy? And so you're trying to balance all this, and you're right. It just smoothened the transition for me. You get that opportunity becoming a head coach at this level. It feels like I've sort of been fortunate to jump maybe a couple of years in terms of not maybe having to do that assistant coach grooming role. I felt I was ready to be a head coach anyway. I see myself more as a head coach than an assistant. And that's just kind of my mindset. I feel like I'm strong-minded and opinionated, and I see the game being played a certain way.
Sure.
So that's just my mindset. So the opportunity just knocked on the door, and, things have a funny way of falling into place. I believe if you work hard, things eventually fall into place.
Yep.
And so that's what happened in this case. And, it's been a good run this year, and we're looking to cap it.
I just want to note that you mentioned Jared Scaldi, former Flame. You're owned by 4 Calgarians. You played. It's amazing to me how Calgary and Cardiff have all of these little connections, you mentioned them. And we'll get into your players in a little while because there's probably some connections there too. Let's just stop and talk about the playing career for a second, because you had a really good run in the American Hockey League. You had a really, some leadership with ECHL teams, but you got a chance to play in Austria. You got a chance to play in Germany. You got a chance to play in Italy. I think I'm missing. Was it Hungary or another country?
Denmark.
Yep. Tell me about the decision to go to Europe and what? Obviously, you're staying right now, but was it fun? Was it what you were hoping for? Was it what you were told it would be?
My first year in Italy, my wife and I, we just became engaged. So we're like, this romance, story is going to happen. And we arrived, and for people who don't know, living accommodations are slightly different in Europe. They're smaller. You're usually in a flat or an apartment. So just the way of life is a bit different. And so, I think that first year was a bit of a shock to the system. But you get used to it. The people have been great. I've been fortunate to play over here, like I said, parts of 8 years, enjoy different cultures, see how people don't think all like. That's also helped me. You got to understand, like, different people from different cultures think differently, and that's okay. Yeah. And until you live it, it's one of those things that you can get pretty bubbled up, and so it was really great playing in all those countries. Obviously, just having the experience of my son being born in the US, my oldest daughter was born in Canada, my youngest daughter was born in Denmark. So, you kind of have that international feeling of traveling. Every culture offers, a little bit of something that's different. I will say the Welsh are the most Canadian-like people.
Oh, okay.
Quite polite in general, very courteous, very community in the sense that it's very easy to interact with them. I have friends here that I'll probably be friends with for the rest of my life more than any other country. I think part of that's a bit of the language. We speak predominantly English here. Welsh is a little bit more Northern Wales, but not so much in Cardiff. So that helps. But every country offered something different. The Danes were very, very nice people. That was a great country. Copenhagen, we've been able to travel all over Western Europe and Western civilization. And it's benefited me. We've traveled, we've seen most of the world, most parts that I even want to see. I wouldn't want to go personally much further east than maybe like Czech or Slovakia, or I think they call it Czechia now. But for me, so I've done everything I really wanted to do in terms of travel. And that's because of hockey. We have our life because of hockey. We basically have everything to thank for hockey. So it was kind of used as a tool and kind of as a segue into my career that I'm in now.
Tell me a little bit about your North American experience. As you're aware, we now have the Wranglers and we have American Hockey League hockey here in Calgary. What was your American League experience like?
Yeah, I had a great American League experience. My first taste was obviously being drafted, going to Hartford, playing in the original 6. I have to say, New York, they basically give you no excuse to not succeed. You get everything you need. You travel with class. They treat you with class. And our teams were competitive. My first 4 years there, that was a lot of fun. And so, it's a great league. It's the best development league in the world. It's competitive. It's, the biggest thing you notice leaving the American League to Europe is the competition of practice. The intensity, the competition of practice is very high at the American League level. Whereas, over in Europe, it's competition, but it's a little more friendly, if you will. And so it just, guys are clawing for that next level. You're constantly being evaluated. You're going up and down. There's a system in North America. And so my experience in Hartford was, in a sense, Rob, you take it for granted when you're 20 years old.
Sure.
You're coming out of junior hockey, playing in one of the best junior hockey cities, and you're going to one of the best NHL organizations. I felt a little kind of, spoiled, to be fair. And so you're there and you have these first, you know, 2 or 3 years, oh yeah, you know, I should be in the NHL, you know, only a matter of time. And then the third year goes by and you're kind of like, well, you know, I'm getting screwed over, you know, so I'm better. You know, you're trying to, you know, I'm better than so-and-so. Why is he going up? And then a whole new slew of prospects come in. And then next thing you know, you're a veteran. So, you know, that's what pushes a lot of players out, is that veteran status. Right. Yep. And it comes quick. If you're healthy, it's 4 years, 5 years, and you're a veteran. So you're 25 years old, you're a veteran, and teams are only allowed, I think in the American League, it's 5 plus I think, I don't know if it's changed, but it's 5 veterans, I believe, and then 1 in-betweener, I believe.
I'd be remiss if we didn't spend a little time talking about the Hitmen. Gosh, you know, to me, it's like yesterday. I remember you were part of some really good Hitmen clubs, some really good players, but darn near 20 years ago is when you started that. What brought you to Calgary? What were your first, because you're a Manitoba guy, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So what was it like coming here?
Well, I had family in Calgary. Yep. You know, I went undrafted into the Western Hockey League, so I was fortunate to get quite a few invites. And my first thought was, I'm going to Spokane. I just want to get away, and I want to go as far as I can go. And you know, my parents kind of talked me out of that. And then I had a letter pinned on my dad's old, you know, those old bulletin boards, those pin boards. Yep. I don't think those exist anymore, but so my letter was signed and sealed, ready to go to the Regina Pats. And John Townsend, who was a scout for Calgary out of Manitoba, gave me a call that night, out of anybody, just to say, listen, I think you should come to Calgary. And he was the only one to follow up after the letters. So I said, you know what, that's pretty cool. We got family in Calgary. That makes sense. And so essentially, I end up going to Calgary for a tryout. I don't make the club as a 16-year-old, and I come back super disappointed, but I am protected and end up playing in the Manitoba Junior Hockey League for a year, which probably in hindsight was, you know, one of the best things that happened for me. Sure. I get tons of ice time as a 16-year-old, a lot of success, confidence is growing, obviously evolving my game, playing against men or young men now. And I end up making the club the following year, you know, but like you mentioned the names that I played with. I mean, Ryan Getzlaff, right, Andrew Ladd, Jeff Schultz, Justin Pogge, who was obviously a Canadian icon at the time for World Juniors, Carl Alsner, Ryan White, you know, Pushkarev, you know, I'm probably missing guys, Andy Rogers, first rounder to Tampa, you know, and the list just went on and on and on. And, you know, it's Martin Jones, you know, he was a backup when I was leaving. And so, you know, it's incredible that we didn't win the league. That was my biggest disappointment, was I felt like we had the teams to do it. And we just couldn't get over that hump. I mean, Medicine Hat was a bit of a thorn in our side, you know, with Darren Helm and Dorsett. And, you know, they had some good players there, and they just always put up a good fight, and they beat us out. You know, my last year, I think they beat us out in the conference final, and I remember Brandon beating us when Getzlaff and Ladd were there. That was
a 7-game series, right?
Oh, that was a stunner, because we came back to Calgary for game 6 and lost.
Yeah.
And then had to get on that bus all the way back to Brandon.
Well, you know, the one that sticks out in my mind is that game 1, because you beat Brandon 10-1 at the Keystone Center. And the most incredible statistical anomaly that I ever saw was somehow Pushkarev was -1 in that game. Like, of all the things. But you know who you missed was a 16-year-old Alex Plant played in that series, right? Like there was just
Alex
so
Plant,
much, right? There was just so much talent on those teams.
It was kind of when you looked on paper. I mean, every year in the hockey news, we were ranked in the top, you know, for sure the top 10 to start the season. That year, I think we were probably ranked the top 3, maybe top 5. And there's so much talent. And we won 10-1. I remember that because I actually had a 4-point night, and I thought, holy crap, that might stalk me in the draft a little bit. so you know, that was quite a disappointing loss. I just felt like we had them on the ropes, and we didn't finish them off. But that's junior hockey.
I was going to say, right? That's junior hockey at its best.
You watch it now. I mean, I watched the St. John. I live up by St. John, New Brunswick, where the Memorial Cup was just held, and the swings in that tournament, and it just brings back these memories of, like, you think a team is in full control, and that's where you see the junior mistakes happen, and all of a sudden it's an exciting hockey game again.
Well, I'm afraid I have to ask you one difficult question, because I don't understand. You had family in Calgary, but how did you end up getting stuck with Dan Thompson as your billet? Like, that makes no sense to me, Brody. None.
Well, kind of a blessing for Dan. He would maybe argue that. Best thing that maybe happened to him,
to him, yes. For him, yes. I'm not worried about him. I'm worried about you.
Yeah, that's right. Well, funny story. We were in our first billets, and things just weren't working out with myself and my roommate, and he was Keegan Dansereau.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Dan, they're related somewhere down the line through a cousin in Saskatoon.
Yes, that's right.
Right. And so basically, our billets, they had enough of billeting, and they had both of us. And so essentially Keegan was 16. He was having a bit of trouble, and they wanted to get him somewhere comfortable. He was supposed to be the next big thing coming through. So they basically were doing everything they could to keep him comfortable. I was kind of the tag along, and it was kind of like, hey, we'll take Keegan. And like, yeah, here's the other thing. We got this other kid who's living with him. Would you mind taking him for a couple of weeks? We'll try to sort out a new home for him. And to be fair, I think Dan realized how good of a kid I was, and that I was the best thing that happened to him. And he's like, we'll keep him. And you know what? I got to give a shout out to Kristen, his wife, who basically drives that family.
She's a saint.
Right?
I say.
An absolute saint. And so I got to give a shout out to her. And, she was everything and anything a mom can be away from home. And one thing I will say, all joking aside, I maintain my relationship with them, and it's quite a close relationship. They flew out to New Brunswick to come to our wedding. We're in I know Dan's down in San Jose at his son's. They're pinning his doctorate right now for chiropractics. And the other funny thing about living there was, so Brody and Adam, right? My brother, I have a brother. His name's Adam. How strange is that?
That got confusing, I bet.
Right. A lot of confusion going on in the house. And so, but it was great. We were busy. 4 kids, Dan and Kristen, 2 hitmen, idiots running around, just doing our thing, playing hockey. And basically, we had the time of our lives. You don't even realize it. And it was fun. It was so much fun. And, Dan's been good for me. And we banter back and forth quite a bit. I'll still beat him in golf and every such sport that he probably challenges me to.
Right.
He tried to put a pool table in the basement one year. That didn't go well. Foosball table. That didn't go well.
Oh, he's notoriously well at losing. Like, he does so well at losing. He handles it like a pro.
Just like a pro.
Oh, my God.
So he's probably clawing at his phone right now, listening.
Oh, no, I'm sure. Yeah. This is the greatest thing in the whole. Are you kidding me? Somebody's talking about me. It's great. And he's my fishing coach, for those who remember from the old show. So, I won't tell him this, but he's a good man. So, and he actually helped connect us, which is fantastic.
Yeah. He at the end of the day, I'll just say, best thing that could have ever happened to me was end up in their care. And you know what, they actually, listen, you're 16, 17 years old. You have to understand how influential people are over. That's why when you go and ask players, hey, who's your favorite coach that you ever played for? Mm-hmm. You'll often get a junior hockey coach or a college coach.
Yeah.
And that's because you're at such a pivotal point in your
impressionable, right?
Yeah, very impressionable. And so I was super fortunate to land in their house and help guide me and just sort of and walk me through the professionalisms of business and hockey and life and of course I had my parents. I should mention them. They obviously had a heavy influence on me and guiding me through that. And, but the fact of the matter is, you live there in impressionable years, and then you go home and I have kids now, and it's one thing to give up your kids at that age. And so for my parents to allow me to do that, to pursue my dreams, I think they're quite happy that I ended up in a place like that, where they could feel comfortable and they could sleep at night knowing that I was in good care.
Brody, I'm going to bore you with a quick story because I want to bring it back to Cardiff. But in 1996, the internet was brand new, and the Cardiff Whales were one of the first teams ever to have a website, and they had a little thing on there for jobs. So I clicked on jobs, and I sent my email. Sure, I'll move. I'd love to. And somebody called me from Cardiff and said, yeah, we'd love you to come over, and it never happened and all that. But I've always been intrigued by the team. Tell me about hockey culture in Cardiff. Where does the sport fit?
Okay. Well, I'll just say this. In Cardiff, we sell out every night. So we have a building of about 3,000 people. So we have a loyal following. But we're in football, soccer nation.
Yeah.
It's just our reality. And being in Wales, we're actually in rugby nation more than soccer.
Sure.
So we have the stadium in Cardiff. I believe it's 76,000 people. When they get the national team going, New Zealand comes through, South Africa, France, all the big heavy hitters come through, and they sell that place out. Then we have a soccer team that's in the Championship League, which is one level below the Premier League. So they kind of have their following. But you know what? A Saturday afternoon, it basically goes like this. A lot of fans will go watch soccer in the afternoon, and then we have the 7 p.m. puck drop because it's a 3 p.m. kickoff. They'll go from soccer, and they'll come over to the arena. And it's a full sports day for them. And our fans are loud, and they're loyal, and they're hard, and but they are honest. They are honest, and British fans are quite they're involved in the game. It's a different atmosphere, not as much as like maybe the European, but we still have the drums going all game. They're loud. Our last game, I thought the roof was going to come off, and so. That in that sense, it's a bit different, but they come every game, they support you, and it's really good environment to be in front of, because the loudness of our arena is a perfect size for how many people come. But you go to Sheffield, I mean, they'll get 9,000. I think we were leading the European, all of Europe in standings last year, or maybe this year at some point during the regular season. So we have a really good following and in the league in general, but it's certainly not up there with soccer. I mean, we don't compete. We don't compete with that. We don't compete with rugby, but we have our own little niche here, and it works. And the league is shaking its reputation for being a fighters league. It's a very skilled league now, and it's very fast, and a lot of good young players are coming here. And now it's starting to be a league that can maybe catapult you into the second league in Germany. It can take you to Denmark. It can take you to Norway. Some guys can get out to the second league in Sweden, which I know is probably just noise to a lot of people, but those are really good leagues. Slovakia, you can go there from here, and then we get some players like Brendan Mickelson, who played here last year, former Flame, right? He comes here. We do get NHLers, Brian McGrath, who played in Nottingham. So it's not just a matter of it's a bad league. A lot of good hockey players come here. Brendan Mickelson just not here in his late 20s because he's playing for the Calgary Flames. Yeah. Right.
What about development though? Because I do know on your roster you have some local products too. So is there minor hockey in Cardiff?
Yes, there is, but it's not ran like it's back home. Okay. So my boy's 5 years old. Okay, he's in the minor hockey. So right now, the way they run it in Cardiff is they have a junior Devils program, and essentially it's a U10. Okay, they don't have anything below that. And essentially what you do is you go to this clinic, and there's 6 levels, okay? And you have to clip through 6 levels, and then you graduate to the U10s, and then you can travel. But these kids are traveling for games 3.5 hours away, 2.5 hours away. And then, so it's like, it's not like it's just an easy sport, right?
Yeah.
So they got a lot of growth to have. Our particular team, we have some of the better British players. We got some young Brits that, we want to develop. They all participated in the friendly matches for our Team GB. So they all represented the national team. And they were just up in the first group for World Championships. They got relegated last year. And all our players participated in that tournament as well. And so we do have that going. In terms of the development, here's the really fine line with the development in this league. Because the league is so important, September 1st is just as important as March 1st in terms of you're chasing down the league, points matter. And so you're trying to draw that line with putting guys in situations to help develop them with winning a hockey game.
Sure.
And winning matters. We are in a professional sport, and this is based on season tickets, and to put seats and bumps in seats, as they say, you got to win. You got to have a good product. And so there's an expectation. And so you got to obviously take care of that, but you also have a responsibility to the players to develop them. So we try to bring them up, but like my boy is in level 5 of 6 and he's 5 years old, just to give you kind of an idea of where it's at. If I were to drop him in Canada right now, I would suspect he'd probably, now he's 5 years old. We're not, I would suspect he's maybe a little bit behind though, just because, he gets on once a week. And it's tough with my schedule as well. It's the weekend. I'm on the weekend, but that's where that is. But the hockey, from what I understand, has grown quite a bit. I don't know what it was like previously before I got here. But they do have some programs in place to certainly, help encourage the game. There's probably about 40 kids out on the ice when my boy's out there.
Okay.
And so they're sectioned off into groups, and they go Saturday. So group 1 through 3 is Sunday. Groups 3 or 4 through 6 are Saturday.
Okay. To wrap up, I just want to go back where we started. You're in the middle of a push here. I mentioned your roster. I saw Cole Sanford and Trevor Cox, a couple of former Medicine Hat Tigers. One thing I did notice from some of your roster players from North America, a lot of guys that took the scholarship route out of the Western League, went to U Sport and played. So you're getting them a little more seasoned. Is that a recruiting place for you? Are you looking at U Sports?
Oh, big time. For multiple reasons. One, we don't compete with guys coming out of the American League in general. They go to the DEL, SHL, Sweden, Finland, Switzerland. Sure. So you got to kind of coordinate towards your market. So CIS is a very good market for us. ECHL is another very good market. And you typically, the good thing about getting the CIS guys over maybe an NCAA guy sometimes can be that the NCAA player that you'll get will probably have been a third, maybe fourth liner. And because the top players are usually going to make that jump to the AHL, right? Whereas, so they haven't been in that situation where they've been relied on to produce offensively year after year. Whereas the CIS guys have probably been in a scoring role. So you're looking for those gems. You're looking for those guys that can skate. That's the first criteria. And then you're looking for those guys who are looking for an opportunity to get to Europe and maybe aren't really sold on that North American ladder that they feel is involved in front of them. They just want to go and enjoy and see how far this can take them. And so those are the type of players you're looking for. So you look for these diamonds in the rough. We had some tip-offs about, they came in last year, but I had heard about Cox and Sanford before they came. We tried to recruit them to Denmark when I was there. Okay. And so I knew who they were. And, I had a brief stint with them on a line when I was playing. And man, I was like, these kids are special, and they're a lot faster than me. So two more. One, you mentioned it a little bit before video. Tell me a little bit about preparation and coaching and the access to data and information. How much do you have as a coach over there? Do you have analytics? Do you have video? Are those tools that you use? Yeah. I mean, it's, well, first of all, the hockey world's evolved. We're not on VHS, right? Right. Yeah. Of course. So I have access to all the Flames analytics. I have access to the Wranglers. I have access to everybody I can pull off of Instat. So that's a big part of when we're looking for a power play and why our power play maybe is struggling, or we'll go look at who has the top power plays in the NHL, and then we just go and and then it's all basically it's broken down for us already. So you can just go pull, Tampa Bay power play. Let's go see what they're doing. Okay, now let's go look at Calgary's. Let's go look at Colorado's. Okay, so that's kind of the web-based access that we have. And in terms of, again, coming to Cardiff, I have a lot of resources here. So all my home games, I have in-house statisticians for me. And they basically customize it to what I'm looking for. So, like things like face-offs, time on ice, Corsi, and we kind of get a little bit more in depth with some other analytics that we try to look for. And then, so I have that in-house, and then we obviously cut all the games on our computers. So we have access to our own cut video. And then that is what I will ultimately analyze and dissect and then present to the guys. Will be off that video, but I could pull video from that Instat. I can go and grab power plays or 5-on-5s or whatever I want to find, really. They do quite a good job of breaking a lot of it down, and you get as much as you want or as little as you want. It depends what you want to pay for.
Right. My last one for you, I'm still fascinated by your journals. I think that is so cool, and I'm glad you shared that with us. But having said that, then who are the coaches that are influences for you? Because you had so many in such a wide variety, but are there any that stick out?
Well, I mean, okay, so we go back. Who are your most influential coaches? Well, I had Kelly Kissio.
Yep.
I had Dean Evison. I had Joel Otto, and I had Dave Lowry. Okay, right?
Yeah.
Pretty good cast. To
I would say so.
Kick off my career, right? So in terms of, I guess, direction, they had a heavy influence on the direction I wanted to go, how the game needed to be played, and what type of work was required. If you ever see Dave Lowry or his wife, for that matter, in the gym, like they really kind of set the tone. Dean Evison is a very intense yet motivational coach. You could see that in Minnesota. Kissio brought a wealth of knowledge to the off-ice element, that what was required to be a pro. And he really ran a tight ship on the ice, of the structure part of it. And then Otts was great, for face-offs and just teaching a lot of like the defensive side of the puck. Then as I carry on my career, a lot of good coaches. I mean, Ken Jernander, I had him for 5 years in Hartford. He was really good. And Ian Herbers, who's in the University of Alberta now, I had him for a stint in Milwaukee. And so the list goes on and on and on. And then I got to say, where I found my last stop in the ECHL, probably really kind of, I went from like journaling to being like, okay, this is the guy that I think I can have mentor me, maybe. And his name is Rob Fatorik.
Oh, okay. Sure.
So I played under Rob. And essentially, the way he approached the game, he had a way of, I felt, simplifying it for the guys in a way that made sense defensively.
Yep.
And so it just kind of, so I pick his brain a lot. I've stayed in touch with most of my former coaches. I call them for advice. Robbie would be one of them. But I'll tell you, when Robbie, I went down to Norfolk my first year. Last story here for you. And I go down, it's November, I don't have a contract, and I'm like, I just got to start playing hockey or I'm retiring. All right. Never been to the coast. I was a little bit fearful because, we have a resume as players as well, but I had to start playing. So I'm like, all right, I'll call some teams. We'll get around. Norfolk, let's go down. Head down to Norfolk, and this guy, Brad Aldolf, I think his name was Aldolf or something like that. He was there such a short term. I don't remember really fully his name. That's how bad this is. But then he gets fired after 6 games. I'm like, oh my God, what kind of situation did I walk into? We've hired this new guy, Rob Fatorik, and Ben Boudreau, who's Bruce Boudreau's son.
Yep.
Who's the head coach of the Fort Wayne Comets. He was the assistant coach. And so Benny Boudreau says, Kate, we have to come back for practice tonight or this morning. And then tonight we have to come back, and we have a new coach, Rob Fatorik, coming in. I'm like, who's Rob? All of us were like, who the hell's Rob Fatorik? And he goes, listen, my dad knows him. Like he's a great, good coach in the NHL, or coaching the NHL. Like none of us had a clue. So you go on YouTube, right? TSN top 10, Rob Fatorik throwing his bench on the ice in New Jersey, right? Yep. And we're thinking, holy crap, this is not good. And so we basically, all we know is that he wants players that have name bars in their helmet for practice. He wants a stopwatch, and he wants a whistle. And we're like, okay, yeah, we are going to get bag skated like we've never been skated. And you know what? It was quite the opposite. It was just a teaching day. He wanted the name bars just with the tape, just because he didn't know anybody.
Yep.
And so that's kind of what he wanted. And I'll say this, I'll share this story. This is where it opened my eyes. I'm driving into the into practice for the evening. We have our youngest daughter, who was just maybe, I think, 2 years old, a year old. And so my wife's driving me back. We have one vehicle, and the phone rings, and I answer it, unknown caller. I'm like, I remember, I just got to the team. I don't have everybody's phone number. So I go, hello, who is this? And they're like, hey, it's Rob Fatorik. And I was like, yeah, okay, like, fuck off. Who is this? You know? And so he's like, it's Rob Fatorik, your new head coach. And so I'm convinced somebody's messing with me. And then after the third time, he's got that thick Boston accent, which I don't want to impersonate because I don't want to offend them if I do it wrongly. But, you know, he's like, basically, I don't know what to tell you, but this is Rob Fatorik, your new head coach. Is your wife with you? I'm like, my wife? I was like, yeah, okay. And I'm like, so I hand the phone to my wife. I'm like, hey, Kay. I was like, I don't know. He wants to speak to you. And, you know, and so he gets on the phone and I was like, well, what did he want? And she's like, he just basically said, hey, listen, I'm Brody's new head coach. There's a lot of stuff to cover. I just want to apologize in advance. I will be taking a lot of his time for the next week. We will get you guys back into a rhythm. And I know you guys have a young one and it's awfully heavy on the wives often. So I just want to call and give you that heads up.
Wow.
And I thought, man, that's pretty cool.
That speaks volumes, doesn't it?
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So
I think so.
So from that was my first impression. And you know, first impressions matter. And you know, they're not the only thing, but they matter. And so I thought that was cool, and I've maintained a relationship with them. And like I said, I've had the coaches in Europe coach a bit differently structurally. You know, I had Ben Cooper, who was the video coach for Team Canada, Olympic winning gold medals. You know, and so you know, I've had like enough coaches to go off of that. I've taken a lot from a lot of guys, and you know, so it's been a good experience. I mean, listen, hockey's fun. And when it stops being fun, then, you know, it's probably time to move on.
Well, I wish we didn't have to move on because this has been fun. Brody, thank you. It's great to catch up. Love the stories. Love what you're up to. We'll be paying attention. Love the Calgary connections. My hope is we can get you back on here pretty soon.
Yeah, hopefully with an elite league season title or a playoff title or both. That would be fantastic end of the year.
I would love that. Thanks, Brody.
All right. I appreciate it. Take care.
Brody Dupont. Former Calgary Hitman, former third-round pick of the New York Rangers, and the head coach of the Cardiff Devils, yes, that Cardiff, over in Wales in the Elite Ice Hockey League, as they are, well, not really worried about trade deadline. Reminder, we are in the Oodle Studio. We're in the Oodle Noodle Studio. How about that? We bring the heat. Try their butter chicken, mac and cheese, Kung Pao noodles, Bangkok Pad Thai, classic, vegetarian and gluten-friendly options. Pickup and delivery, 2 locations, 1244 17th Avenue Southwest, 105 Main Street North, Airdrie. Quickly, we got our final mile here. Just want to make mention of a couple of things. Congratulations to Flame alumni and former Flame tough guy, Tim Hunter, who was named a couple of days ago to the Alberta Hockey Hall of Fame. Announcement coming today. Calgary here we are complaining about the lack of big events. Calgary will host the Special Olympics Canada Winter Games next year, 2024. Together we can is the slogan. Very excited about that. Want to wish everybody the best of luck with that. 2 things before we go. Ryan was telling me that apparently some of you on the old social medias have been going, hey, he's ripping off David Letterman. Look, it's David Letterman. Look, it's Letterman. Yes. Hey, kids is ripping off Dave Letterman. That voice is ripping off Dave Letterman. That marquee is ripping off David Letterman because he is one of the biggest influences in my life. It is a homage to him, as we like to say. So yes, you are 1000% completely ripping him off. Yesterday, I want to make note of a little thing that happened in an arena in Bowness. As you know, I'm a supporter and an advocate for Heroes Hockey, which is a program that uses hockey to teach skills and get education for kids with difficult backgrounds. They're not in the system. They are outside the system. They're not meant to be longtime hockey players, but they are meant to get the benefits of the sport, and it teaches them about, discipline, and it's just really what the game is all about. But one of the things that happens, and we find it happens with our superheroes kids here in Calgary, although Hockey Calgary is great and most teams are great, in SO Minor Hockey Week and in the playoffs, for some reason, some parents and some coaches go nuts. And they show up 2-3 hours before a game. And one of the things that can happen is they can try to kick our teams out because the parents there don't value our sport and the way we play it, because it's not as important as theirs. And if you think I'm making this up, I'm not. We've literally had parents dragging our bags out into the hall room. We've literally had parents tell us that our kids aren't valuable enough in the sport, that we should be out of the way. So it's a major pain in my ass. It's a major pain in the ass of Kevin Hodgson and the Heroes director. And we hate that part of hockey. Yesterday in Boness, the Superheroes having a little bit of a tough day, and a team showed up even before they got on the ice. And we thought, holy crap, here we go. Playoffs must be on. Well, that team didn't get the message that their ice had changed and they were there too early. But instead of causing problems and everything, they went on the ice and they joined the Heroes kids and played games with them and worked with them and shared the ice with them and made them feel like they belong and made them feel like hockey players. Just want to tip my hat to the U13 AA Broncos for what you did yesterday. You don't know it, but you made a huge difference in some kids' lives. 2 days to go till the trade deadline Friday. We're going to have a show. Who's going to be on that show? You're going to have to stop by and check in because I'm not telling you. I'm not. You're going to have to find out for yourselves. Monday, Kelsey Snow will join us in studio. I cannot say enough about our guest today, Brody Dupont from the Cardiff Devils, and how good was Danny Austin from Post Media, and how good is this guy, Printz, our producer? Amazing work today. Thanks to everybody for stopping by. This is Just a Game with yours truly. We'll see you on Friday.